Welcome to this episode of the Upfront Podcast. As always, I am your host, Nina Mueller, and this is the place where you get your dose of upfront and honest conversations with people from all around the world. Enjoy the show. Hi, everyone. My guest today is Victoria Vlasenko, coming to us directly from Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine. Victoria is a YouTuber, and that is how I came across her. She was open and courageous enough to be willing to talk about how the attack on the Ukraine has changed so many lives. We will be speaking about her experience living through the war in Ukraine, with her job still demanding that she works regularly, about her personal opinions on how this could possibly end, and what everyday life in Kyiv looks like. I would like to preface this conversation by saying that I wanted to discuss different aspects of this war, and to highlight mainly what the Ukrainian people have to adapt to in this new normal. But since Victoria is based in the capital city of Kyiv, this of course doesn't mean that it is the same or even similar for people in other regions where they have to fight for mere survival every day since Russia attacked in February of this year. Since the recording of this podcast, there have been some developments and many more civilian people have been killed by the Russian army. I hope you understand that I do feel like asking some critical questions to gain a better understanding of the situation, but this in no way is brought up to relativize Russia's or Putin's actions. Please bear that in mind, and if you want to reach out to Victoria, I will have her socials linked below, but please be respectful and mindful of what Ukrainians are going through. This podcast contains very difficult subject matter, so please take care when listening. So, Victoria, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm actually very excited about this call. I'm very curious about the questions you prepared because I have no idea what they are.
Yeah, well, that's usually the case because we want to keep it like upfront and honest. And so that's why I usually kind of surprise my guests with questions. And we try to be as open and honest publicly as we can. So I had actually come across your channel on YouTube because of your minimalism journey. And I had noticed some things when you're doing your apartment tour and you were saying something like, oh, never mind the sound. They just turned off my water. I was like, wait, is she in the Ukraine? And so I started going to your Instagram, not in a stalkerish way, by the way. But I just wanted to know because I felt like maybe that would be an important story to tell. So that's why I wanted you to come on here and really tell us your perspective, your opinion, and your experience as much as you can and you're willing to, because I think it's very important for us to hear from people who have been directly affected by the attack and the war in the Ukraine. And so please tell me a bit about yourself.
I think I'm going to start with calling myself a multi-potentialite, a person that does a lot of things, and I've done a lot of things in my life, although I'm just 24. Well, I started, I think, my career, let's say, from the university. Well, everybody goes to university. I did too. So I finished the philology course. So I am a Bachelor of Philology. I speak several languages. I speak English and Spanish, which are foreign for this place. And well, this is how I started my way. Then I did some tutoring, some English tutoring, Spanish tutoring, which I still do. And then I worked for a tourist company, which was a wonderful company because we did trips to Chernobyl. Maybe you heard this story about that power plant explosion. Well, that happened quite close to my home too. So it's never boring here, a lot of explosions just. And I worked for that company as a customer support manager. Then I worked for another company. And now I found myself in content creation because also one day I was working in the design sphere. I was doing graphic design. So a little bit of everything, And I've been living, my good life here in Ukraine. I worked for a company as a customer support manager, also doing YouTube part-time, also doing my Instagram part-time. And everything was fine till, well, one morning, nobody expected, but one morning, my mother called me at 7 a.m. Well, she never does that. Who calls anybody at 7 a.m.? And she called me and said something like, um, are you going to leave? Are you going to escape? What are you going to do? And I'm like, excuse me, it's 7 a.m. I'm not going to do anything except drinking some water and brushing my teeth. And she was like, well, did you know that the war started? And I'm like, no, what war? What do you mean? And well, this is how I found out that on the 24th of February, uh, Russian army came to Ukraine, and some heavy fights were starting at the border. But later, it came closer to us, to Kyiv, where I live. Um, Quite a stressful morning.
What was your initial reaction after you found out that it was actually war?
I was so surprised. You know, there were a lot of talks going on about that this might happen.
Hmm.
And I was hearing them and like, come on, no, it's not. I was really naive about that. Um, so this morning was a big surprise for me. I was, of course, scary, like, excuse me. And yeah, I think scary is the right word to say. I didn't wear to work. I immediately went to the news feed and I spent the whole day reading the news feed, which was a really bad idea. It gave me even more anxiety about that.
Mm.
The fun fact was that it was my husband's birthday. We were going to have a party, but it didn't happen. Yeah, I was really scary and sad and I couldn't work, but we were customer support managers. We've got to answer questions all the time, no matter what. It was hard to work that day. And a few months after that, it was also not a good place for me. I mean, that whatever you do, you think, what if the bomb comes to me this day? And it's not like super scary. I mean, there's probability, of course. There's low probability that this happens with my house, but it still can. And yeah, the next few months were difficult. I think that the biggest thing that helped me a lot in this period is stopping to read the news, because it really made me more scary, more sad about the things that are happening. And even though it sounds radical, because you probably should know what's going on around you, but this helped me a lot in this
Mm.
situation.
Gosh, I can only imagine because so living in Israel, you're kind of prepared for a war to start at any point, but the Ukraine is not really used to like living under a constant threat, right?
Yes, yes, at least the capital. People
Mm.
who lived in the east, that's one story. But in the east of Ukraine, there has been war for the past 8 or 9 years. So I heard the stories of people living there under the bombs, but I still did not believe that it would ever come to me home. And you know what's funny? The scariest moment of my life was probably not this war, but the one that happened when I was in Israel, by the way, when I was visiting my granny there. It happened to be the day when the neighbor country, I don't know exactly what was happening, started to bomb the place where I was living. It was Ashkelon.
Oh
And
no.
this was probably even scariest. I don't know why, maybe because I was still immature and quite young those days, but I really believed that it would come to me. Now I don't believe it that much, because mostly the enemies, they target not like you personally because you're not a threat. They mostly target the structures that create weapons, for example, or the military bases and something
Mm.
like that. So it's not a disaster, for me to live here. Although the first months it was scary, but later I was like, oh, another bombardment.
It's weird what people can get used to, right?
Yeah, yeah, it
Mm.
is.
Yeah, very sad too, I think. So, had you noticed any changes? I'm not sure whether you were maybe too young back then to really realize it, but any changes since like the annexation of the Crimea in 2014? Had you noticed any changes in your day-to-day life?
Yeah, sure. Especially among the population of Ukraine, a lot more people were becoming more patriotic, more nationalistic, I'd say. Um, and maybe not from 2014, but from this part of this conflict, I really started to feel a little bit more cautious about what I'm saying. I know we hear a lot in the media that Ukraine is freedom, Ukraine is brave, blah, blah, blah. And I'm not particularly agreeing with that because you now cannot really freely talk good things about Russia. And nobody does. But what if somebody likes like Russian culture or I don't know Russian language? I'm really afraid to speak about that right now because I know
Mhm.
there are a lot of people who are angry, and I kind of understand them, of course, because well, you never expected your life to change that much because of some invasion into your country. That's why a lot of people are angry right now and can create conflict out of nowhere because you said something good about, for example, your relatives in Russian, and you don't blame them for starting the war. But there are a lot of people here who blame every single one of Russians in what happened.
A lot of general resentment.
Yeah, yeah.
Is there resentment really towards Putin, or is it towards Russia as a nation?
Oh, Ukraine is so divided right now in that matter. People who surround me are, of course, not hating Russians. Well, because I surround myself with people who are not.
Who are
I
more
surround myself.
inclusive, kind
Yeah,
of.
are more inclusive, probably, and don't blame
Right.
people for their nationality. Because if you think that a random Russian is bad, then the only reason you do that is because of their nationality. If he in particular did something wrong to you, of course you have the right to blame them for something, but it's not directly all the nation who came here. Yes, the army, yes, the soldiers, you can be really angry about them, but I don't see the logic in blaming every single one. And I see that a lot of people here now hate Russians just because they are Russians. And of course, they have some arguments behind that because they believe that all the Russians had to go to the squares and demand something from Putin, demand the end of the war, and they are all guilty because of voting for Putin on the elections. Well, I do not agree much with that, but there are still very radical people, though it's a little bit hard now to find friends because you really have to feel the ground, before you start some friendships.
Sure. Yeah, I understand that. I think people have become more socially aware with the whole pandemic, anyways.
Mhm.
And now I think those extreme policies and really criminal acts and acts of war do heighten the feeling of you either share my values or you don't. And that has become more and more important, I think, for a lot of people in comparison to before the war. What was your everyday life like? What was the feeling like in your everyday life compared to now?
Oh, this was a lot more simple. I'd say a little bit less worries. And this just became one more thing to worry about, a little bit at least. And the biggest thing that affected me personally, although my house was not burned, and that's thank God, I now worry a lot about what's going to be tomorrow. If tomorrow I will have heat, I will have water or gas or other things that we now modern people cannot live without. And I care a lot more about money now because the economy only is falling, and the only thing I can see now is our local currency being less and less valuable, and this is also a little bit upsetting. Before that, I was not worried about that this much, and I think these worries are the things that changed. I got a lot more worries now, but not too much. I still am able to live a happy life. I wouldn't say it's like a disaster. When I tell my granny about what's going on, she's always like, "Oh no, oh no, we're all gonna die," and it's not like that. We still try to adjust. People are incredible creatures, and we really can do a lot of stuff under a lot of pressure. And even when the water supply was shut down for a day, it's only a day, by the way, it's not nothing too scary. I was like, oh, another difficulty. We'll get over it. And it's a great thing that even war can teach you that to be that anti-fragile type of person because do you hear me?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I just mute
It's
myself
just,
sometimes so it doesn't, like, the
it's
sound of my
just.
dog doesn't interrupt.
I was thinking maybe electricity shut down again.
Oh no.
Even a war can teach you some nice things like being anti-fragile, because when stresses come to your life, you learn to overcome them, and then you become less stressed and scared because of some difficulties coming even in other spheres of your life. So yeah, there are terrible things. People are dying and people are becoming like disabled every day. But if you don't notice positive things about that, it's kind of sad. You should try to find something positive and overcome difficulties. Otherwise, it will be just a disaster for my mental health.
Hmm. How do you find balance in everyday life? How do you manage your mental health?
Yeah, I found some things that I like doing that I find that help me. I think that's nothing new for anybody. It's a little bit of meditation, a little bit of yoga, stopping to read the news all the time. I now almost don't read them, only like 15 minutes a day. Also, I focus a lot on my work, on my content creation that I do, because it's really something that I think I will rely on in future. This is why if I find myself being sad about some events happening around me, especially connected to the war, I try to focus on something else. If I find this source of stress, I try to get a little bit away from it and do other stuff like my work, meditation, yoga, I don't know, talking to my cats because they are adorable. And that's it.
How do people handle it? Like handle being surrounded by war and threats and being in the midst of it every day? Do people talk about it on the streets with their neighbors, their friends, or is it more something like in Israel where people don't really talk about it? They just act?
Well, here it's different. We all talk about it all the time. And the first question you ask somebody when you meet somebody is, your family okay? Are you okay? Is your home okay? This has just become a part of our lives, and we talk about it a lot. What's that called? We make toasts for Putin's death on family gatherings. That's just become a thing that we always discuss, talk about. We read the news, we discuss them again. I don't know. I think I got used to it.
How do you feel the Ukrainian people felt about Russia before the war started? What was the connection and the relationship like, do you think?
Oh, it was bad, but not as bad as now. I mean, the relationship with Russia got bad when the Crimea was annexated, and a lot of people got very angry at Russia, at its government, but it was not that much on people. Were mostly blaming the government. But now it got even worse. Maybe in some ways it became a good thing when it comes to the Ukrainian language, because a lot of Ukrainians speak Russian since the childhood, and we all know this language perfectly. And I know all the people that surround me, especially in Kyiv, speak Russian like naturally. But with those events, first after 2014 and second after now, people are speaking a lot more of the Ukrainian language. I don't, because I just don't find much use in it. And Russian was my native language since mama sent me lullabies with it. But a lot of people find their internal patriotic mission in it to start talking Ukrainian language. And it's good in the way that a lot of things now are appearing in this language, and it will definitely not die, not extinct, because of a lot of people that are starting now their blogs. They writing songs in Ukrainian. They are writing books, and it's a good thing for a language to happen.
Hmm. Do you think, I know this is a very intense question, and I'm not sure whether you want to answer or can answer it, but one thing that I did want to bring up was Putin said in one of his press conferences, I think that was many, many months ago, actually, he said something about he wants to denazify the Ukraine. And then some news articles around Europe have popped up saying that there are a lot of nationalists in the Ukraine, and that is probably what he was referring to. Do you know where he came up with that theory, that sort of propaganda slogan? Is there anything sort of substantial behind that?
I'd say yes, we do have a lot of nationalists, and yes, there is a special community of Nazis here. And I know it's not common opinion, and we'll try to defend Ukraine in all sorts of ways. But if it is here, it is here. Was this a valid reason to invade another country and spoil the lives of millions of people? I don't think so.
Of course not. Yeah.
Yeah, but what he said is somewhat true, especially in the territories of the East, because another problem that we have is a lot of part of the land, a part of population of Ukraine that wants to separate from Ukraine. What's that called? I'm not sure.
Oh, right. I know what you mean. They just held elections to like whether they want to become part of Russia, right?
Kind of. They became a separate autonomic territory. It was
Mm.
self manifested territory. Of course, nobody in the world accepts it and respects their decision to be separate from Ukraine. But yeah, that is what it is for the last 8 or 9 years. And what I wanted to say is that there are those people who want to get separated from Ukraine, and there are those people who think that it's absolutely not an option. Ukrainian nationalists that are very radical, of course, about any land or any territories being separated. And there are a lot of stories from peaceful citizens from those eastern territories about Nazi guys who were just killing the people, torturing the people who wanted to separate from Ukraine. This is sort of why Putin and a lot of people in Russia were concerned about what's going on here, because there were some groups who were too radical about that, and there were stories who proved that there's some communities of Nazis here who are not super happy about lands separating and people wanting to separate from us.
Mm. I do want to mention at this point that I don't, in any kind of capacity or way, want to take Russia's side or Putin's side for that matter. And I'm not trying to, I didn't want to give a reason which would make it reasonable for a country to attack another sovereign nation. So I didn't
Mhm.
want to put that out there as a valid reason for attacking another sovereign country. I just wanted to state that very clearly. I just wanted to ask you on your
Mhm.
opinion on that because I do
Yeah.
find that interesting, and that adds another layer because I think Russia has a lot of the same issues, doesn't it, with ultra nationalists?
I think yes. It's just probably I'm not very aware of that because it's a different country. I'm more
Hmm.
concerned about what's happening here. So I'm not sure. Maybe yes. There are some radical people right now who are happy about bombs getting to our power plants. Like, who are you trying to defeat? Us, civilians? There are definitely some radical people here and there. I believe this, especially now when this whole Russian thing, this whole operation is starting to fail. Not starting actually, it's failing a lot. It was so stupid. I mean, from the point of view of a civilian, of course, I see that there is no reason to invade another country and um, like make our lives miserable and make a lot of people flee from Ukraine, leaving their families. But when I come to a little bit more wider point of view, let's say I'm a politician and I try to decide the destiny of the country, I see that Russia had certain motives, and it's not, of course, an excuse, but it was so stupid to come here to spoil everything, relationships between countries, to make things a lot worse and not even reach your goals. This was so weird for me. Like when you come here with a goal, like and not reach your goal, then it's becoming like a lot more pointless than it would be if you, for example, at least, I don't know, denazify Ukraine. I know that I'm also trying to make excuses for what happened. It's not right. And of course, there was no reason to come here for Russian army. It's just when I try to understand this from the point of view of Putin, I realized that the whole government and the military structure in Russia is so, I think, old and weird and stupid and incompetent because even though they were coming here with certain goals, they A, didn't reach those goals, and B, spoiled the life of millions of Ukrainians. So that's just my opinion on this matter.
Mm. And I think it kind of has turned, sorry for my language, into another shit show that is merely about Putin's pride. He can't just
Um,
take his troops back and say, okay, you know what? We failed.
Yeah, yeah. At this point, he could just stop it because it's obviously not going anywhere. But he doesn't. We keep struggling from no electricity and like no water supply. But like nobody's stopping it. They are demanding the negotiations that Ukraine doesn't give them. And it's like now not about people, it's now totally about politicians.
Yeah, which is very sad because in the end, the people have to face the repercussions, really. It's
Yeah.
usually the civilians who suffer the most.
Yeah, that's really sad.
Mm. From your Instagram feed, you had posted that you just wanted to go back to the Ukraine. Did you actually flee?
No, no, I was visiting my granny in Israel.
Okay.
Yeah, this was a weird story because I don't want to offend anybody. It's just on Israeli beaches, there are so many guys that are just coming to talk to you for no reason. And it's not something that happens a lot in Ukraine. That's why I was telling that I want to go back to Ukraine because this very much annoying thing does not happen here as often as where I was. But no, I didn't flee, although a lot of subscribers offered me to. And although it sounds really reasonable until now, and my whole family actually moved somewhere, my husband's family moved somewhere farther from fights, I still do not want to do that because there are a lot of good things about Ukraine which I don't want to leave. And my whole life is here, and it's really hard to move cats to somewhere abroad. And maybe I just find excuses not to go there because it's my home, and my home is where I'd say my heart is because I just really love this place, my apartment. I love living here, being here. So it's not fair that because of some guys who decided that they wanted to come, I have to go somewhere. It's not fair. I will not do that. But my mom and my brother and my sister and my nieces, they moved to Germany, which I'm really happy about because my sister found there good doctors about her disease. I'm not going to talk much about that, but it's
Sure.
just turned out to be a good thing for my family, especially for my sister. And as to other members of family, there's also my father, my stepfather, whose house got burned down because of one of the bombs, and they had to move, of course. And also, my husband's parents lived a lot closer to the territory where they were having fights. They also had to move to a different part of Ukraine. Just a lot of people moved, and I'm not going to, at least for now, because I live in the capital. It seems to be the most defended part of Ukraine because when there were heavy fights around my whole city, the Russian army, they still didn't come to my city because it was so heavily defended. Probably because it's the capital. I'm really lucky to be born here. Yeah, this is why I'm not moving anywhere for now.
Understandable. What would have to happen for you to move
Oh,
or to
um,
leave?
I think there have to be more bombs around me for me to consider moving. Um, Again, it's not too scary because I know they are not aiming my particular house. they're aiming some military bases. So this is why when I see that it's now like a big mass, there are armies like Ukrainian and Russian one on my streets or in the city center, this is probably when I will move. Now, for now, just it didn't happen, so I don't find enough reason to.
When you were in Israel visiting your grandmother, did you feel, apart from being at the beach, but did you otherwise feel like you would rather stay in Israel, maybe? Did you feel some kind of safer not having to be surrounded by war 24/7?
Honestly, I didn't feel like I wanted to stay, maybe because I'm not like a fan of super hot countries. I don't know. I didn't feel the urge to stay at all, honestly, but I did feel safe. The moment I crossed the border of Ukraine, I started to feel safe. The interesting fact is that not because of bombs, but because of people. Apart from just us being quite a criminal country, the crime rates in Ukraine are quite high, with a lot more weapons now and with a lot more veterans who came from war and who are ready to kill. It's becoming more and more scary here in Ukraine, and especially with all this nationalist thing. You never know when you can irritate somebody who doesn't like the Russian language because it's the language of terrorists, and I speak Russian. And even because of that reason, just of course, it's not the reason to bullying her, but I definitely feel scarier here because of that, because of a lot of weapons here, because of the high crime rate, and because of a lot of veterans who killed people coming back from the war.
What does your everyday life look like when you walk through the city? What is the atmosphere like? What are people like? What are people doing? Is there like this is maybe an incredibly ignorant question, but how is everyday life continuing, especially in your city? Are people still on their jobs, or is everything kind of in an emergency state? What does that look like?
Well, it's a lot better than it was the first months when the invasion started. People, I think they became a little bit more supportive. Now, when I stand in the line to the local trying to get some water, I now feel a lot of understanding in the eyes of people because everybody's ready to support each other. Everybody's ready to have a small talk about whether our families is okay or not. Um, and You know that a lot of people escaped Ukraine when this all started, but actually a lot of people came back here because it's not like too bad to live here. And
Really, already?
yeah, yeah, a lot of
Mhm,
people are coming back. I don't know why, maybe because of high taxes somewhere else,
mhm.
but they do come here, and there are a lot more people now. And actually, life is going on as it was before. Yeah, first months we didn't have public transport and all the conveniences, and the grocery shops were empty because of the panic. But now it's totally okay, actually, and people even I think became kinder to the problems that other people face, and they are ready to help. And there are a lot of people who volunteer and help. And if you ask me what atmosphere it is on the streets, it's actually totally the same that as it was before, honestly.
Oh, wow. I wouldn't have imagined that, to be honest.
Yeah, I think we tend to exaggerate until we see this with our own eyes and decide that you don't want to waste
Mhm.
years of your life on sorrow because of something that happened. You want to try to move on and to find new job if you lost your job, and to I don't know, find uh, an electricity generator if you don't have electricity for long hours. People tend to survive a lot better than we think. And even when we think that there's disaster somewhere, we still have to keep in mind that media wants to make it a little bit more exaggerated because otherwise people wouldn't read it, I guess.
I do think that it's important though that like the reporting on the situation sort of displays the gravity and the severeness of what is happening. Maybe the more severe happenings of people who have witnessed horrible things
Mhm.
happening to their family or their neighbors or something like directly in front of them personally, I think that probably that being highlighted probably does lead to more empathy amongst other societies, other countries, which I think in turn is a good thing.
Yeah, you're
Um,
totally
yeah.
right. I'm sorry, I probably told only about my life here in the capital, but the lives of people in Kherson or in Kharkov that were occupied, their lives are probably a lot more different from mine, and they have a lot more struggles than I do here in the capital. So, yeah, you're right that everything that's highlighted should be highlighted and talked about. I just probably personally do not experience that much of severeness of what's going on, because I try to protect myself and my brain from a lot of stress, probably, and
Mm.
because these terrible things are not happening on my street.
Yeah, sure, but understandable. And that's why I wanted to get your opinion and your experience from you personally. And obviously, like we can only speak on our own experience and all that. But I think
Mhm.
it's important to highlight any sort of experience really
Mhm.
that is important to greater understanding of what is happening around the world. So I'm really grateful for you for doing this. Is there something that you think the international news media isn't really covering or isn't really aware of about the situation on the ground?
I think that the biggest thing that surprises me a lot and actually upsets me a lot is what's going on the places that are not under governmental control. Um, because of it, there can be even more conflicts between nationalists and like people who want actually to join Russia, because there are a lot of people who want to join Russia here in Ukraine, and you never know what's going on there behind the scenes when just peaceful civilians are probably I don't know how to talk about that. I'm just not sure that I can offer proofs of that. But I
Mm.
heard just many stories of just peaceful civilians who wanted to join Russia being killed or tortured by Ukrainian nationalists. And I think this is not talked a lot about. There are terrible videos that I sometimes see of that happening, and like it's not really highlighted because it will show Ukraine in a bad light, and it's not probably beneficial for somebody. Of course, the same things are happening on the other way around. I'm pretty sure that there are some Russian governors that came here trying to establish their power here. And of course, there were some Ukrainians who wanted to still stay in Ukraine. They were also killed or somehow um, somehow humiliated by people who think that Ukraine is Russia. I've heard of those stories too, so it's like it's happening both ways, and I don't see a lot of that being enlightened.
Mm. I have heard, as of the day of this recording, the 22nd of November, I am still informed as much that there is a law that the Russian government had released or declared that even retroactively, if you do say anything about Russia or the Russian government or its policies, you can be incarcerated for up to 15 years, as far as my understanding goes. Is there anything similar happening in the Ukraine, or is that an entirely different story? Is there no sort of oppression of civilians and no surveillance like there is in Russia, obviously? As far as you know, I mean.
I have heard of some elderly people being imprisoned for having Soviet symbols on their clothes. Um, I think this is a lack of freedom, but is if we talk about 15 years for that you criticize government, no, I have not heard of that in Ukraine. There are channels being closed, some media being closed because our president wanted them to, but nothing that severe, actually, at least as far as I know.
I don't want to, let me make that very clear. I don't want to equalize the Ukraine and Russia at all. I just wanted to ask because that is something that I had recently heard about Russia and its policy change, and that really, yeah, scared me because
Mhm.
obviously we all know how much surveillance there is of common civilians in Russia, and it's scary to think that even retroactively, if you utter one wrong word against the government, that you can be imprisoned. And I'm actually bringing this up because there was some, at least, protests that the media covered where people in Russia were standing up against what Russia is doing in the Ukraine and that Russia is actually attacking the Ukraine.
Mhm.
And I just wanted to highlight that those people are also very brave, and I think it's good that the media is also reporting that there's not all of Russia is of the same opinion, and
Yeah, I
even
agree.
though it's illegal apparently now to say something against the war, there's still people who are standing up in solidarity with Ukraine.
There are a lot of
Sorry.
people who left Russia because of that, because they said something that later appeared to be a crime. And I
Hmm.
really respect that some people had enough courage to do so, because I think I wouldn't have enough of that. And I really appreciate those who did say something against it.
Yeah, that's very courageous.
Yeah.
What do you think the Ukrainian people, the majority, like the people that you know, your friends, your family, people that you talk to on the streets, what do you think those people mostly want? What would be a good solution to an end to all of this?
Well, of course, most people want just peace. That's basically what we want. But that's true that now there are a lot of people who don't want to any negotiations even from the Ukrainian side, because they believe that there can be no talk with Russians and with Russian government. Well, that's their opinion. I respect that. But yeah, the majority is the one that wants to fight till the end, till the last person alive, to defeat Russia, to win this war. These are the just general vibes I hear around myself. I personally tend to be a little bit calmer about it, because I know there are people who live right in the epicenter of the soul of wars, of fights, and I know that above everything else they would want peace. If to have peace it takes to talk to Putin, I think they would want that, because there's nothing more valuable than peace, especially right now when a lot of people know what war is.
What do you personally hope for?
Oh, I'm really hoping this is coming to an end soon.
Yeah, what would be a reasonable solution to ending this?
Honestly, I'm not that smart to think about some guys above who decide our destinies and what would be the best solution. But it feels like it's okay to talk, to try to somehow negotiate, because it's the most peaceful way of winning the war, of it being terminated. Yeah, we can fight, we can continue because we've got a lot of weapons thanks to Europe. We can continue losing the lives of our soldiers, but personally, I think that it's not worth it, even though, like, we all believe that we are right and they are wrong. Let's say, generally speaking, I still believe that it's okay, even until now, to negotiate. It's just personal opinion. But I understand people who are still very angry at what's happening and don't want any talks and conversations with Putin's government.
Do you think what would potentially, if in theory Putin were no longer to be the president, do you think what would come after would be better or worse?
Not really better. I mean, who
Mhm.
knows? Who knows what's going to be next after Putin? Who will be there? Maybe it will be just another proud guy who who
Yes.
wants to make some sort of stupidity like that. I simply don't know. I feel that it will not be particularly better, but I neither think that it can be worse. Just don't know.
Mhm. What are your personal plans for the future? Do you have any big aspirations?
Oh, yes. I still dream about a lot. I try to, of course, enjoy the moment right now, even in difficult times, and I find ways
Mm.
to be happy. But of course, there are things that I want more of. And well, first of all, that's peace. And second of all, of course, I want to develop my career of a content creator. Um, that's become my dream, and it still is. And I want just a happy married life with my husband. Nothing too serious. Maybe get rich one day. I don't know. But that's probably it.
Is there anything you'd like to add from your side?
Not really. Thank you, Nina, very much for the conversation. I
Of
really
course.
enjoy talking, although I'm a little bit worried because it's not like I'm not the best at English, but I'm working on it. And it was a pleasure for me to talk to you and to tell my side of story, because I think that the majority of people would now answer your questions differently, a little bit in a more
Mm.
patriotic way. But I tried to be honest, and thanks a lot.
Yeah, of course. I always appreciate all kinds of different opinions as long as they're respectful of others. So thank you so much for doing this. You did amazingly, and I really, really appreciate your insights. And I know talking about these kinds of topics is anything but easy, so I appreciate it even more. And I hope you're still going to be safe and you can go on to live your life the way you want without any hindrances from any men's decisions.
Yeah, thank you. I wish that too.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Upfront Podcast. Please do consider subscribing wherever you are listening right now so you won't miss out on any new episodes. You can also follow us on Instagram and on Facebook at The Upfront Podcast and join in the conversation. See you next time.